for Wales. So this is our first session. It's about quick tips about the application, which I know that you guys will know that you're in Wales Foundation School already, but you still have time to rank your preference. So we'll just go through that quickly later. So these are the teaching sessions we have planned for the next few months. So just to let you guys be aware, this is our first session, and we have a few sessions about induction. We have speakers from NDU, BME, and GMC. There's a session about the academic foundation program, and just about how to get more information about it, because feedback is that it's a bit difficult to get information online or from people. And a few other talks about audits, projects, e-portfolios. So do like and follow our page on Facebook, and we'll keep you updated for any sessions, for future sessions then. Moving on. So yes, before we start the session, feedback from you guys will be very helpful. So this will be at the end of the session. So this QR code. So do fill in at the end and let us know what we can improve on and what you find helpful. Okay, so today there are speakers from all these hospitals. They're going to give you a quick short introduction about their experience, what they think is good and bad in those hospitals, and what some helpful tips when you start working there, just so that you have an idea when you apply and rank your preference about which hospital you would prefer and what jobs really. So I'll be starting the talk, just a quick introduction. I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but this is the FY1 program. There are 12 academic foundation program, 9 FPP, 57 list programs, and 303 standard FP programs. The list is online. I'm sure you guys have got an email about it, and I won't go through that, but if you have any questions, you can ask in the chat, and we'll try to answer them later. So there were a few questions before we had the session about LIF and whether we'll be talking about it. So just a quick introduction then. So LIF is basically a longitudinal integrated foundation training program. As I mentioned before, there are 61 rotations available for this 2021 to 2022 rotation. There are 4 health boards that are currently have the 61 rotations as written there, and it's basically the same as normal FP programs, but on Fridays you get to go to a GP practice to have placement basically, and one of the GP will be your educational supervisor and your clinical supervisor as well. Usually you will share the same supervisors as a GP trainee. Otherwise, Monday to Thursday, you'll be doing the same job as you have applied for. So there's not much difference. The only difference is that you'll be spending 1 day out of the week in a GP practice. So this is the minimum score applicants for the last few years, and is separated by hospitals. As you can see, that 2020 was a bit different because there was a bit of a change of health boards, but the scores are, how should I say, it's distributed quite the same over the years, as in Cardiff and Vale will probably have the higher minimum scores, and other parts of Wales will have a bit of a lower. So I'm sure you have been sent an email about your score, and based on that score, you can compare it and see where would be best for you to apply for across Wales. And this is probably more related to you guys, because this is the score for this year and the distribution. So from what I'm told, that the minimum score for this year is 70, which is great. So look at where you are across this distribution graph. And if you're higher on the graph, then you have a higher chance of you getting the first rank that you preference. So it's basically the same ranking preference, and the way they choose is the same as when you apply for foundation school. The higher score you have, then the higher chance of you getting your first, second, or third preference. And if you're lower down the distribution kind of score, then you will have a lower chance. So that's something for you to be aware of when you rank your preference. So moving on, we'll be talking about Cardiff and Vale. So Faris, who's our first speaker, will be giving a quick introduction and speak about what his experience is here. Faris, are you there?
Yes, hello. Can someone just message on the chat that they can hear me okay, or someone say online? Cool, awesome, fab. So thank you, Julian. That was an awesome introduction. So as Julian said, I'm Faris. I'm currently one of the academic F1s based at the moment in University Hospital Wales, currently working in critical care in the ICU unit in the hospital at the moment. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, Julian, if that's all right. So what I'm going to cover is just a few basic, I suppose, the headline features about working at UHW. And then at the end, when we move into the breakout rooms, I'm happy to answer questions in more detail to cover stuff. Essentially, it is a massive hospital. It's the biggest hospital in Wales. And because of that, there are an awful lot of F1s in Wales, which, based at UHW and in Landoc as well. So if you do decide to apply for UHW, just bear that in mind compared to some of the other district general hospitals where the groups might be a bit more tight-knit in terms of friendliness. It may be a bit more challenging to do that, particularly in COVID times at the moment, given the size of the hospital. So for my first job in paediatrics, I interacted probably with only a handful of other foundation year doctors, and with different teams throughout the parts of the hospital, but there can be some points where you don't see some of the F1s entirely. It is a big hospital, and as a tertiary centre and now a major trauma centre, there are lots of different teams about. They do provide accommodation on site, and I'm sure that those of you who have come to Cardiff Medical School, which I think is probably the majority of people on this talk, will know that it's a very convenient location. If you look at the foundation year 1 rotations, you'll see that there are an awful lot of surgical rotations and general medicine ones. Those tend to form the majority of your foundation year 1 rotations. Just something to bear in mind. If you're looking to do something, say, such as the lift programs, you'll find those mainly based around GP. But if you're looking to do more specialist rotations in F1, which probably the majority of you won't be looking for that, but if you're looking for something like psychiatry, for example, in F1, then that's not something that Cardiff and Vale usually offers. And just also bear in mind that most of the F1 rotations tend to include a combination of usually either 2 jobs at UHW and 1 job at UHL, or vice versa. So just bear that in mind when you're looking through the jobs. You may also be posted in Rookwood, but that's only for 1 out of the 3 rotations as well, as opposed to all 3. So just bear that in mind as you're looking through the jobs. Next slide, Ewan, if that's all right. So some of the benefits that come into a UHW as a tertiary centre, so no matter which department or which team you look, you end up working in at the hospital, you'll see a huge range of cases. So to give you an idea of this, so when I was on paediatrics for the 6 months, we got sent all the patients that were diagnosed with PIMS-TS, which is thought to be an autoimmune condition, which has been on the increase basically since the COVID pandemic started. And I got to examine and see most of the patients that were diagnosed in Wales with that condition. And that's probably one of the best clinical benefits of actually coming to UHW and to Cardiff, is that you'll see the most complex cases, mostly the ones that have come in from district general hospitals, get referred to us quite often. there are an awful lot of teaching opportunities because we're literally in the medical school. If you want to get involved in teaching medical students, there are loads of sort of ways to go about doing that, whether that's through continuing to be involved with student societies, which you may have done as a medical student, or through more official channels. And I've been lucky enough to have the opportunities to do both. Like I was saying before, the proximity to Cardiff is quite ideal. In normal circumstances, whatever normal will end up being, you're obviously in the capital city. So if you're looking to stay in Cardiff for an extra year, it is very much ideal. And in F1, most people are not taking exams. So you'll have the opportunity, hopefully, to be able to take advantage and visit and do lots of things within the city. In terms of the workload, I've found so far that the intensity has probably been the right level. So when I was a final year student on the paid placement, so I did general medicine on the COVID ward until graduation, and then I've done peds and now intensive care. And I would say all those jobs, they've been definitely all busy, but the right level of busy, I would say, so much that I'm still learning. But not so much that I've found I've been burnt out by the clinical workloads. Something to bear in mind, and it might be worth asking Julian, who's been doing a surgical job this year as well, is just to ask around about how people are finding general medicine and general surgery at the moment during COVID times as well. And I can talk in the breakout rooms about what other people have told me about that. People are very keen to know that. Next slide, Julian. So what I would also say, just to consider when you're speaking to all the speakers tonight, just know that because of the way that the application process works for foundation programme in Wales, if you don't like the hospital that you end up or the health board, there is always the opportunity for change in F2. And quite a lot of foundation year doctors do use that opportunity. I've got many friends who are currently doing F2 in South Wales, having previously done F1 in North Wales, and you will find cases of vice versa. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. And when you're looking through each of the different talks tonight and what rotations you want to do, if you're really struggling to find the perfect rotation for you, what I would advise doing is just going through the list and the health boards and eliminating the places you don't want to do, so you don't have to think about them when you're coming to your decisions and rankings and everything. I've got my email address there, and I'll be in the breakout rooms at the end as well to answer any questions and to help with inquiries as well. Thank you, June.
Thank you very much, Faris. Sorry, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but at the end, after all speakers have finished, we'll be having breakout rooms. Looking at the number of participants, we might open a few more breakout rooms because initially we were planning to do it based on North, South, and West Wales. But we will let you know a bit more, and you'll be able to choose which region or hospitals that you want to, which breakout rooms you want to go to, and the speakers will be there to answer any questions you have then. So thank you very much again, Faris. Moving on, it will be our next speaker. So it will be Yasmin, who is from Swansea. Yasmin, are you there? Yasmin.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I'm Yasmin. I'm an F2 in, well, Morriston, but I've done my F1 and going to complete my F2 at Swansea. So majority of my F1 was in Singleton, so I know more about Singleton as opposed to Morriston, so I'll be mainly kind of speaking on Singleton. So for F1 in Singleton, I did haematology, and then I did respiratory for 8 months because we didn't switch over for COVID. And then for F2, I've done sexual health and dermatology plus general med. So you do the general med on calls, and I'm currently in pediatrics, and I'll be finishing off in Jerry's. So I think my slide is coming up next. Is that lovely? So for F1 in Singleton, you don't do any nights, which is great. So majority of the rotations are usually general med, they don't have any surgery. So you will have a surgery placement, but they will send you to Morriston to do the surgery. So most of the rotations are gastro, respiratory, GERES, care of the elderly, etc. You'll do your on-call days. So that's usually, they don't have like an A&E, so there's an admission unit where you get referrals from GPs and maybe at like Morriston, etc. So you see those patients, and then you'll have ward covers on the weekdays and weekends. When you move to F2, you then do your night shift. So you'll do twilights, you'll do your nights, SAU and ward cover, and you also look after the HDU patients in those times as well. For me, I really enjoyed my F1 actually in Singleton. So it's a DGH. It doesn't have any tertiary services. It doesn't have an A&E, and most of the acute patients are sent to Morriston, but you still see a fair share of patients. Most of the patients are obviously quite in the older kind of spectrum, but a lot of them are quite complex and stuff. So you do get to see a range of things. You do get to see like your respiratory patients, you do get to see your gastro patients, and then there's hematology and oncology as well. So you do get to see those patients as well. There's like loads of opportunities to do clinical skills. There's great teaching as well because it's linked to the university, Swansea University. It's quite like a small hospital, so it's quite friendly. You get to know everyone, you get to know the other F1s as well, and you tend to know most of your regs, your consultants, so you know everyone on a kind of like personal basis, which I really enjoyed. Swansea itself is, I think, quite a big city. So I've obviously come from a bigger city, but for me, it's a decent size. I like it. The view is amazing from the hospital. There's a lot to do, so that's like the extra benefits. Some of the kind of cons, I think personally, is not having like the acute services or the tertiary services. So you don't get to see kind of a broad range of patients. And also out of hours, not a lot of staff available. So you tend to deal with a lot more on your own compared to maybe the tertiary services or hospitals with more staff. So you often find yourself as the F1 seeing patients who are using quite high and having to deal with these patients and then having to call your reg. It's often just you, the reg, and an SHO, which can be a negative, but I think is actually quite a positive because you learn a lot and you learn how to kind of manage acutely unwell patients quite well. And I guess in Morriston, they have like critical care outreach, all that kind of thing, which you don't have in Singleton. So I think you end up actually being better at being able to stabilize quite acutely unwell patients. So I generally think, I think it was a positive actually working in a small hospital because I got to do a lot of clinical skills. I got to do quite a few QIP projects. My portfolio was actually, I think, better than if I currently at the moment in my F2, which is quite sad, but because I had a lot more opportunities because it was a smaller hospital, and if there's a lumbar puncture, you'll be able to do it as opposed to, you know, in a bigger hospital, it tends to go to the SHOs, etc. So I did really enjoy it, but just to kind of keep in mind that you don't have the A&E and the tertiary services, which I guess you can experience in F2, so it's not a kind of a lose-lose. Yeah, so that's me. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well.
Thank you very much. And that's very good talk about Swansea, Singleton Hospital and Morriston Hospital. And yes, as you mentioned, that if you do have any questions at the end, we'll be having a question and answer session. So do leave them to the end then. Right. Thank you very much again. And moving on will be our next speaker. It is Yin, and she's from she's currently working in the Gwent and the Grange University Hospital as an F2. Yin, can you hear me?
Yeah. I just want to correct that in F1, I wasn't in Wrexham. I was in the Royal Glamorgan, which is in South Wales as well. So I'm happy to answer some questions if anyone is interested. It's a very nice hospital.
Yes, sorry about that. There was no mistake.
No worries. So I'll be talking about the Grange University Hospital, and it's only actually opened last year in November. So they accelerated the opening of this hospital because of the COVID pandemic. But as you can see, it's quite nice and shiny. Apparently it was a £350 million project. It's 470 bed acute hospital. So you can imagine all the things there are quite new, and there's a lot of really nice flashy equipment. So my jobs that I did was hematology. I'm currently doing intensive care and anesthetics, and I will be going to A&E next, and those are my rotations. So I can only speak for sort of the medical take and also the intensive care unit, which is where my experiences are. But as a general, most of the specialties will be available in the Grange Hospital because that's the new tertiary centre for Aneurin Bevan University Health Board. So the whole model of it is that most patients will be sent to the Grange for an acute assessment, especially overnight, because there's no, so A&E in the Royal Gwent and A&E in Neville Hall are now shut, and they only have sort of a 9 to 5 medical assessment unit, and anything out of hours will come to the Grange Hospital. So it is quite busy. And all the tertiary services, so like all the surgery, CPOD list will all be in the Grange. There are some elective cases happening in the Gwent and Neville Hall, but most of it, I think they're trying to arrange to be in the Grange. So as you can imagine, it's quite busy, especially overnight, because there's no acute medical take anywhere else in the health board. So from my experience of working sort of a night shift as an F2, we have the med reg, we have me, we have someone on twilight, and we have 2 sort of middle grade SHOs. It sounds like a lot, but actually it's the whole health board. So that's originally staffing 3 hospitals, now staffing 1. So we have about 25 admissions overnight on a normal day. It can get much more on a busy day. But actually, some people really enjoy that because of the big flow of patients. So I personally would see like 10 patients overnight. And I think that personally, I really enjoy that experience of being able to work under pressure. It's quite supportive because it's still kind of small enough to have a DGH feel. So I worked really quite well with the med reggers and the SHOs. They're all quite friendly. And I think that's most of the medical take experience. Currently, I'm in intensive care. We have a 24-bed intensive care unit. And I really enjoy my time in intensive care. It's a really, really large team because we've combined 2 intensive cares into 1. So you always have senior supervision on intensive care. You get to do lots of skills because, there's lots of patients, especially during the second wave, there was lots of patients to see. And I found it a really nice experience working in intensive care. The consultants are really lovely. They're all on first name basis with all their juniors. So I would really recommend intensive care as in the Grange. They also see all the post-op patients because there's not a surgical step down HDU. So you get all the HDU type patients that are quite stable on intensive care as well, which is quite nice. Socially, we have a doctor's mess. I think Shan, actually, who's talking about Wrexham, is our mess president. And it is quite social. There's always lots of people in the mess. But personally, because I work in intensive care, I don't really go down to the mess just because of COVID related things. But when I was doing the medical job, I was there quite often, and there was always a lot of people. There's telly, there's tea and coffee. Is quite nice. The commute wise to the Grange is about a 30-minute drive. So I live in Cardiff. And so it's a one-way 30 minutes, which isn't really that bad because it's a big motorway drive, no small country roads and things. And I don't find that to be a big problem. So with the pros and cons, I would say it's really nice because you kind of get the feel of a tertiary centre, as in it's really busy, but it also has the size of a DGH. There's very diverse pathology. So the Aneurin-Bevan Health Board covers sort of quite affluent areas like Monmouth and also really deprived areas like Newport. So you get a really diverse pathologies that you're able to see on call. It is quite intense, but I think some people like that as an experience. It really teaches you how to prioritize, and it trains you, especially I think as an SHO, it makes you really step up. And also the views are really nice. There's stunning views of Cwmbran over some of the wards have really nice views, and also the canteen has a really lovely view of just the Cwmbran Mountains. And I like that. When you're going home, you get a nice view. I think the major con about the hospital is that because it's been kind of opened before it was meant to, there's still a lot of teething issues. So like there's been some improvements with the bleep system, and a lot of things like departments are still quite shuffling the service to adapt to the move as well as COVID. So I'm not sure how things will change in the future. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. If there's something that you really want, it's best to contact the department to check if that will be the experience that you will have, just to be sure. There's a really nice postgraduate department. I'm happy to put up the postgraduate emails for people if you'd like to speak to them. Her name is Caroline Newman, if anyone wants to note it down, and I think you can find her online. She's the postgraduate sort of administrator. She's very helpful. Did someone say they'd like me to speak about?
Yes, Ian, would you mind giving like a short chat about how your experience was in Royal Glam, please?
Was it, are we okay for time?
Just a quick one.
Okay.
You don't mind.
So the Royal Glam is about 500 beds as well. I really enjoyed Royal Glam. I think it's very, well, I worked acute medicine, cardiology, and upper GI surgery. I just thought that the setup of the hospital is quite established. The acute medical department especially had really good consultants that I really enjoyed working with. And if you work the acute job, I don't think you have a ward. I think things might have changed during COVID, but you do very little ward work, and you do a lot of clerking because they have a very good setup of an ambulatory unit. But overall, there's a really good mess culture. There's really supportive seniors. And if you live there as well, which I did, the accommodation's really good. It's right next to the mountains, so you can do a run up the mountains and down. Well, some people do it during the lunch break, or you can go for a walk during lunch break into the, I think it's one of the forest trails. So that's really nice. And I just thought it was a really nice setup for F1. And it's also big enough that you have an 8-bed ITU, so you do get sick patients as well. But yeah, I'm happy to answer questions later if anyone wants to know about the Glam in particular.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. So yeah, as Ian mentioned, she'll be able to answer any questions you have about Royal Glam later during the breakout Q&A session. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks.
So moving on, it will be our next speaker. So it is Beth. So unfortunately, Beth, she's working in the Brongas hospital, and she was rotated to do night shift last minute. So she recorded a video, and I'll play it for you guys now.
Julian, we can't hear this.
You cannot hear that, can you?
No, I think, Julian, when you press share screen, there's an option that says share computer's voice as well, and that hopefully should work.
All right, let me have a look. Right. It's a bit of a problem now, isn't it? Can you hear it?
Still no audio.
Still no audio. Right. I think there might be a bit of a problem. So what I would do is, let's just move on to the next one. I'll try to sort this out at the meantime. Is that okay? Sorry about that. So our next speaker with Nisha. Nisha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So my name is Nisha. I'm currently an F1 at Glangwilli Hospital, which is in West Wales. My rotations were A&E, so that was my first rotation. I'm currently on stroke ward for another 2 weeks, and then my last rotation is surgery, general surgery. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just a bit about the hospital. So it was known as West Wales Hospital before. In West Wales, it is one of the main hospitals. Basically, most of our A&E patients come here because A&E is quite big, and the population size. So Glangwilli is in Carmarthen, which is a part of West Wales, and the population size is about 170,000. Next slide, please. So this is, we have, oh, there we go. So there's about 329 beds across the whole hospital, and we cover areas of Carmarthen, Pembrokeshire, and there's another town, which is Cardiff, and our A&E is 24 hours. Next slide, please. So this is just a map of the hospital itself. It's actually not that big if you compare it to places like Cardiff or Swansea. I haven't been to any of the other places, but so you've got the ground floor, which basically has mostly A&E wards and X-ray and stuff like that. You've got level 1, which is more of the medical care unit. So you'd have the stroke team, discharge lounge, the high dependency units, and different wards depending on where the patient was going to be kept. But most of these wards are medical, such as CADOG and TOWIE and stuff like this. Picton is the obs and gynae unit, so that's another ward. And then on the top floor is the surgical unit. Next slide, please. And then this is just a map to show you where exactly the hospital is. So West Wales, it's about, I'd say about an hour and a half from Swansea, and obviously double that from Cardiff if you're getting a train. They have regular trains from Carmarthen going into Swansea, and then either going directly to Newport or directly to Cardiff. Next slide, please. Okay, so the hospital has, they have a really good surgical unit. Like I said, they have obs and gynae. We have urology, we have cardio. Well, mostly our cardiology patients are not mostly kept here, but we do obviously look after them if they come in. We have respiratory, peds, geriatrics, and then the medical units are split amongst the wards. So for example, I'm part of the stroke unit, but I still do medical on calls. We don't, in our hospital, the F1s still do the nights, you still do twilights. And yeah, so yeah. Next slide, please. So pros and cons compared to the rest of Wales. So West Wales is, I'd say, Wales in general is very pretty. I'm from London, so obviously it's a massive change, but the pros of working in, I'd say, Carmarthen, for example, is it's a bit more of a rural area. So there's a lot more, you know, climbing and hiking and that sort of stuff to do. You can go on long walks, and there's a lot of fresh air and stuff for you to enjoy. The learning experience is very similar to my colleague Yasmin, who said that because it's like a smaller hospital, you know everybody, you would know everybody who passes you day by day. And because it's a smaller hospital, you're given more of an advantage to learn certain things. So we also had the lumbar puncture situation where if you wanted to participate, you were welcome to, because there wasn't an available senior, let's say, for example. The senior staff assistants really good. A lot of them are mostly consultants that might have gone to medical school here, and they've carried on training for years and years and years, and they're more than happy to teach you. The teaching sessions, so we have F1 teaching every Tuesdays, which is, at the moment it's on Zoom, but usually it is face-to-face and you get a free lunch. Portfolio building is good because the postgrad centre here helps you with, they'll offer you teaching opportunities. They will advise you on certain things you can help build for your portfolio, which as an F1 you don't really necessarily think about until you're more or less getting onto your F2, but it would help. Our postgrad centre is right next to the accommodation, so if you live on site, it's literally a 2-minute walk. Like I said, all the staff knows everybody, so it's quite good, and you can go on nice long walks and get lost. Next slide. One of the main disadvantages, I know this is pretty empty, but one of the main disadvantages about working in Glangwilli, and I know this sounds really silly, but unless you have a car, you will suffer because you have to get taxis. And me coming from London, I'm used to getting Ubers and Bolts and stuff like this. So when I first came here, I was really shocked that you couldn't just order a taxi, like you had to phone and, you know, wait for the taxi. The transport system isn't very good. The bus can take a long time, so you can't just get a bus into town because you might be left in town. So a lot of the people I work with, they all drive. It's just me because I don't like the roads without lights and whatever. But so this is one of my cons, because I couldn't actually think of a con to say to you. It's a lovely hospital to work in. Everyone's really friendly, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the end if anybody has any. I think is there a next slide? I don't think there is. Yeah, so if there's any questions, I've put my email in, and let me just have a look on here. Joe, yes, I do live on site. The accommodation is, how do I put it? F1 accommodation isn't the best, okay? Just think of, it's like, I can't really show you but yeah, it's like this. So it's quite big. You get a single bed, a tiny bit of cupboard storage, you get a sink in your room, but you share the kitchen and the bathroom. So in Glangwilli, the doctors have their own residence. So it's 12 F1s that live together. So 6 on the first floor and then 6 on the bottom floor, and we share the kitchen and the bathrooms and the showers, but obviously there's like 3 or 4. And it's nice to live, no, it's not 1 for 12. It's nice to live with the F1s because our mess is also in the building we live in. So usually the doctors all come over and everyone just kind of gets involved with each other.
I'm ready to interrupt. Yes, sorry to interrupt, Nisha. Is it okay if we answer the questions at the end?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So any more questions, just ask me at the end.
Thank you very much, Nisha. That was a very good presentation. Moving on, we'll be welcoming our next speaker. So we have Sean.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi everyone, I'm Sean. I did my FY1 in Wrexham, which was amazing. And I'm currently sort of halfway between the Grange and the Gwent for my F2. So I'm doing the same rotation as Ian. So in my F1, I was quite keen on going to Wrexham. I can't remember why. I wanted to, I think it's mostly location. So Wrexham, it's obviously it's in North Wales, but it's probably one of the most accessible hospitals, you know, from the south and from pretty much anywhere else in the UK. If you want to be in North Wales, it's about a 40-minute drive from Liverpool, Manchester, 20 minutes from Chester. and then a few hours drive from Cardiff. So Wrexham as a town in itself is not very exciting, but it's close to lots of lovely places and lots of lovely countryside. My parents are in sort of Liverpool way, so that was really convenient for me. And it's generally very accessible from everywhere else. And as a hospital, it's generally really, really welcoming. If any of you have done student placements in Wrexham, you'll know it's got a really lovely atmosphere and good reputation for teaching. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to do my F1 there. I didn't want a scary start to F1. I wanted somewhere that was nice and welcoming and knew would be really supportive, and that's exactly what it was for me. During can hopefully back me up on this because he did his F1 in Cardiff as well. There's me, and you can spot Durin in the middle as well. So this is our very first day. So you can see there was about 24 of us F1s. Mostly from Cardiff, but from all over the place. And looking back, we had such a lovely cohort because it is a smaller hospital than, say, UHW. Everyone gets to know each other really, really well, and it's the same for the rest of the hospitals. You know who you're working with and build up really good working relationships. Next slide. I can't remember what picture. Oh yeah, there we go. Working relationships. I mostly did medical jobs. So my jobs were coaty. That was my third strand. Then I did respiratory medicine. And then because of COVID, I kind of got stuck on respiratory medicine, and it did sort of res/COVID with a bit of sort of rehab as well in there. So it meant that I didn't move on to general surgery, which was what I was supposed to do. So I've never done any surgery, which is I'm okay with that. So this slide, actually, I've realised I've got it a little bit wrong because I've since messaged the F1 the administrator. So that's slightly different, and it's been changed since when I was an F1. In the third strand jobs are different. So if any of you have looked already at applying for jobs in Wrexham, you'll see that there's a medical job, a surgical job, and then what they call a third strand option, which is essentially open at the time of when you apply. And then once you've got the job, then you choose from a smaller list. And that list is acute medicine, anaesthetics, coty, obs and gynae, paediatrics, and ED. So they've taken out all of the weird stuff like rheumatology and microbiology, where actually you don't really do anything as an F1 anyway. So yeah, there's 6 of those jobs, which they're all really good. I loved coty. It was so supportive. Yeah, that was the stupid hand that all the doctors made, and they got all the patients to do them as well for Christmas. So it's just that really nice working environment essentially. And I really miss that. Okay, what's on my next slide? Oh yeah, okay. This is COVID. I don't know why I put this in here. I just had some pictures. But again, I think it's that environment of working in a really established, friendly hospital. That yeah, it was great. But they don't give us ice cream anymore. Next one, Jirin. What else have we got? Oh yeah, accommodation. I really like the accommodation. It's directly opposite the hospital, so it's all on one site. And the majority of us we're all in the same accommodation. And this is my little room, which I thought I'd decorated quite nicely. You can't see there's a wardrobe and a sink as well, and there's pretty decent storage space. Be 5 to a flat with a kitchen, and then a shower room and 2 toilets. So it was plenty. And there's a little lounge area as well. And we're all quite sociable. Yeah, that was good. And we're about a 5-minute walk away from a big national park, not national park, country park. It's really lovely, National Trust place. Just go for a little wander around in the evening, and about a 15-minute or 10-minute walk from the centre of town, which doesn't have a lot going on, but there's a couple of clubs that sadly we
and 2
use
minutes walk
as
from our
often.
hospital.
Oh yeah, and you can roll out of bed and you're on the ward. It's great. It's really great. And I've mentioned that you can claim rent back, and I'll answer more questions about this in the breakout room, but I believe this is for anywhere in Wales. If you're going for the accommodation, the free hostel accommodation, if you were to move house board for your F2, there's a sneaky way, they don't advertise it, but there is a way that you can claim some rent back in F2, so it's worth thinking about. It's just quite difficult to set up. But yeah, the accommodation's nice, just the beds are rubbish. Okay, next. Oh yeah, I just thought I'd put some nice pictures. So this is our cohort again, just having a generally really good time. So I really miss that. Now I live in a flat by myself like an old lady, and COVID is rubbish. But we just had a really lovely time, and I think kind of made the most of it. And again, it's that nice working environment. I did make a small list of other things to talk about. Oh yeah, and I was proud of that as well. We made that into a tea towel to celebrate the end of the year. So is there any bad things? I was trying to think. There's not very exciting places nearby to go. Some of the rotations may be a little bit less good. It depends what you want to do. And some of the jobs are busier than others, but on the whole, it's generally very well supported. Find my face. And maybe if you don't want that smaller hospital vibe, then it might not be for you. But I thought it was a really good way to start off. Because now I'm in the Grange, which is enormous. Thank you. I'll shut up. More questions later.
Thank you very much, Sean. Yeah, I can back Sean up. Wrexham was a great time. I had a great time there. As she mentioned, we'll answer any questions you have at the end.
And can we all we all just appreciate Juin's little picture?
Right, moving on.
Thank you.
Right, moving on. We have Tara, who is F2 in Bangor. Tara, are you there?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, I'm talking about Ysbyty Gwynedd in Bangor. So the first picture is just a view from the helicopter pad. So that's just kind of the views from all of that side of the hospital. You're just looking over all of the mountains of Snowdonia, which I think is beautiful and kind of brightens up your day a little bit if you're having a rubbish day on the wards. Yeah, next slide. So if anyone doesn't know, Ysbyty Gwynedd is kind of northwest Wales. So we're just outside Bangor, but we're covering quite a large area. So you've got patients coming from all over Anglesey, all over the Llyn Peninsula, and kind of all the way down to Dolgellau that come into the hospital. So quite a sparse, like, rural population, and some of the presentations will reflect that. So lots of like farmers, really stoical farmer types, kind of coming in with like broken legs that they've had for a few days and haven't told anyone about. So yeah, it's kind of quite interesting. Next slide. So I think, yeah, one of the best things about living and working in North Wales is just the amazing scenery that surrounds you. So I think this is a picture of the Ogwen Valley that I've taken a few weeks ago when we had some snow, and I think that's the thing, if you like the outdoors life, then this is definitely the hospital for you. Next slide. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is already on this website, so I recommend, if you are seriously considering applying here, if you check out this site, you just need to type in postgrad Bangor Wix whatever into Google, and this should be one of the first things that come up. So it's a really good website, and it kind of explains everything that I'm going to talk about in more detail, and there's some helpful videos and things about being an F1. So yeah, definitely look at that if you're thinking of applying. Next slide. Okay, so this is a breakdown of all the rotations. So I've literally just taken this from the website, and all of the little eyes will give you an exact breakdown of what the job involves. So you can read exactly how the ward is structured and what each job expects of you. But like a rough overview. So I think the jobs here are really general. So I think every single job has a gen med rotation and gen surgery. Most of them have got 2 medicine, 1 surgery, which I think is actually better, because in Bangor surgery is quite chilled out. It's not really a massively busy department, especially because a lot of the elective surgeries have been cancelled at the moment. So definitely more medicine, I think, gives you a bit more experience. I think in general in Bangor, the busiest medical wards are respiratory and gastro. So you probably would stay a bit later if you're doing those rotations as compared to some of the other medical rotations. I did gastro as my first job in F1. I absolutely loved it. Even though it was busy, I think you have a really good time. You learn a lot. The consultants are really helpful, and I got the chance to do a lot of assistic drains and taps with the registrars, because we don't have that many core trainees in Bangor. Like the F1s and the F2s make up quite a big proportion of the staff, so you do get a lot of opportunities. I'll just say a quick thing about, there's a new rotation this year some of my F1 friends are doing with emergency medicine as an F1. So a couple of people asked me a couple of questions about what's it like to do ED as an F1. So in Bangor, it's an unbanded rotation where you just work 9 to 5, which is really nice. It's a really nice taster of ED. And I would say if you're not like considering it as a career, but you want to do ED, this is a really nice way to do it, because the SHO rota is really brutal for F2s. You're just constantly doing nights and twilights, and I think can maybe like get you down a little bit. So I think I would definitely recommend it. And there's nothing stopping you doing it again in F2 if you really loved it. I just think probably best not to repeat the specialty, but if you want to try it out, that's a really good rotation. And then there's also the lift program with 1 day a week in GP. And then the next slide. Oh yeah, so I think Bangor's a really, really friendly hospital. So this year we set up a buddy scheme where all of the F1s were paired up with some of the current F2s or some of the F3s. And the idea was just to give them support in the first few weeks of the job. We had kind of an introduction, sort of welcome social down at the lake where we all went paddleboarding. And it's just, yeah, a really, really friendly hospital. And I think we do really try hard to support the F1s, because we know it's a like tough thing, sort of doing your first job as a doctor. So yeah, you'd all be, if you came to F1, so Bangor's an F1, then you'd all get an individual buddy and someone to look out for you. Next slide. So yeah, we also have a great doctor's mess. So I was involved last year with kind of redecorating it. So we've done a little bit more on the decorations since this photo was taken. But it's always like very busy, lots of people in there. Even with COVID, and we've had to do a bit more social distancing, people are still flocking to the mess. And you kind of get the chance to just meet other doctors not on your department, and people that you may be doing on calls with, some of the regs, and everyone's really, really friendly. And we have like weekly food deliveries. Before COVID, we were doing monthly socials down at the pub. We try and sort of do outdoorsy things as well. And usually, if COVID wasn't here, we'd be doing a summer and winter ball as well. And hopefully we can maybe get some of that going again. And we also have a Facebook group, YG Doctors Mess Unofficial, if you want to see a little bit more about what we've been up to. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so unfortunately I didn't have a photo of my room in the accommodation because it's probably a bit too messy. Anyway, the accommodation in F1 is free on site, so it's separate from the hospital, but it's about a 2-minute walk, so you can literally just roll out of bed into the wards, as Sean was saying. I think there is a charge, I think maybe like £150 was deducted from my salary in F2, but if you're going to be living there permanently, like obviously it's totally worth it, like you're not going to get anywhere that cheap. I think some people made a mistake where they just rented a room for a year and didn't really use it, thinking they were going to just stay over on the occasion on call and didn't. So if you were thinking of using it for that purpose, then there obviously is a bit of a hidden charge, so probably not worth it. But if you're thinking of staying in the whole year, then I would definitely recommend the accommodation. You can also leave at any point. I know a few people that did 6 months in accommodation just to get to know everyone, and then they moved out and found a place by themselves later. It's really, really social. I really miss it, especially in COVID. It was basically like student halls again, everyone like having one big party, and just a really nice support when you come home from work to be able to talk to all of the other F1s. And other things, I guess, if you don't want to live in accommodation, popular places are Vellinhelly, Llanberis and Menai Bridge. The rent is really, really cheap in North Wales, probably about £300 to £400 a month, including bills for like rooms in Felinheli or Llanberis. So yeah, you definitely like save a lot of money even if you were to live out. And yeah, if you're coming up here and you want some advice, just message us on the Doctor's Mess Facebook page, and I'm sure someone can probably find you a spare room or something. Next slide. Yeah, so I just got a few things from some of the F1s about why you might want to come to Bangor. So we've also, all of the F1 jobs are 1B banding, apart from the emergency medicine rotation, which is unbanded, but then your other 2 jobs for the year are 1B banding. So that just means that you get 40% on top of your basic salary, which after tax, for me worked out about £2,000 a month. And you can take on like locums internally. There's not always that many going for F1s, but at the moment there's been quite a lot on the COVID ward, so if you wanted to boost your salary, you could always do that. There's also no night shifts, which is a really, really good deal, and you're still on the 1B banding, and also on the lift rotation. They're also on the 1B banding. It doesn't affect them having 1 day in GP because you still are on the on-call rota. So it's an incredible place to live and work, and also it's a very Welsh speaking area, so if you are from here, a lot of the current F1s have kind of come back home, and it's a great opportunity to speak Welsh. And yeah, it's a really nice small DGH, and I think you do genuinely get to know everyone, which makes working on the on-calls a lot easier. And I think last slide. Oh yes, I think I chose this photo because it kind of summed it up for me. So this was like the first week of F1. We'd all finished on the wars, and we were just like, oh, let's just go up Trivan. So everyone went, like even people that weren't really good at hiking. It's just a really nice kind of community atmosphere, and yeah, I really, really miss being in the accommodation actually, and I think you do make really, really good friends. And yeah, this photo kind of just summed the Bangor life up for me. Next slide. Oh yeah, diolch. So thank you for listening, and if you've got any questions, I'll be in the breakout room at the end, and also you can yeah, email me if you've got anything specific that you want to ask, and I'm sure I can link you up with any of the current F1s doing rotations if you want to speak to someone specifically about that. Okay, thank you, diolch.
Thank you very much, Tara. It was a very good presentation. And I think that will be the end for all the speakers. And apologize again for not being able to play that video, audio, video, sound just now. Well, we'll be posting it on the event page later, so you can watch that if you do have any interest about, if you want to know more about Bronx Hospital. So just to remind you again, if you don't mind, it would be great if you can fill in the feedback forms for us. And next up we have is the Q&A sessions. So how we'll be doing is, this would be in breakout rooms. I have created breakout rooms depending on the region, and let me open them up. And if you don't mind joining any of the breakout rooms that you are interested in, and it's in South, West, and North Wales, and the speakers will be in those breakout rooms. And if you have any questions, you can ask them directly. Try to take turns when asking the questions, and try to be polite. Let everyone have a chance to ask their questions as well. Of course, if you have any technical issues, do post it on the group chat, and we'll try to help you out with it. Does anyone have any issues with joining the breakout rooms? Or is there anyone who is unsure which breakout room to join? If you are unsure, you can just stay in this.
Can you call the CR guy first?
Sorry? Hello? Right.
I think you need to tell them how.
So if you there should be something that pop up right in front of the screen to join a breakout room. But if there isn't, if you go to the panel at the bottom of the screen, there should be an option about breakout room next to reaction, if I'm not mistaken. Can you find it? Jemina, which region would you like to go to?
Don't have the option on the screen, so I haven't got it on mine.
Yeah, I don't have it on mine either.
Yeah, nor do I. I think I need. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I've got it.
Let me get the chat. Jemina would like to go to West or North, please. Shall I pass you on to West Wales first then? And Ken wants to go south. Lizzie Hodge would like to go to north. Just a minute. Right. Sorry, that's just too many people. One by. Sorry. Apologize again. We weren't expecting so many of you to turn up. Who have I not sent to the breakout rooms yet? Would you mind just posting again, please? RN, North, North Wales. There we go. Royal Jazz is going to south. Alex is going south. There we go. Arian is north. Anthony Long is going south. RG is going south. I can't find Elo Hughes, unfortunately. Are you in here?
Julian, I'm helping you, so that's why.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to go to breakout rooms? Or unsure? If you're unsure, just stay in this room and we can try to answer any questions. You can ask any questions here if you like to.
I just have a quick question. For Swansea, is that south or is that west?
Swansea will be south.
South, okay. Just double checking because I thought it was south, but people are saying it's west, so I wasn't sure what room to join then.
And so the problem with Swansea is that they changed the health board recently.
Yeah.
But in terms of region, it is considered South Wales.
Wales, okay. I will join that room then, which I just was in actually.
But if I think Yasmin should be in South. Yeah, the person in who's working in Swansea is in South Wales. So if he pop there, it would be great. She's probably gone now. Okay. Anyone else having any issues? Or Sashi. Are you
Yeah.
there, Sashi?
Yes, yes.
Would you mind sending the the feedback form link to everyone
All right.
in the breakout rooms, or just
Yep.
post it there?
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, it's taking its time.
Yes, actually, you can stop